Running on the Spot. Written by the Buried Truck and taught by Wing Striker 3801. Spam Can seemed to return to Sodor far too often for his own liking, or anyone else's. On a late winter afternoon, he delivered a freight train from the other railway. He went to rest in the shed. A chorus of groans sounded upon his arrival. "I'm thoroughly bewildered," he moaned dramatically, "as to why I'm forced onto your metals time and again. Oh, it's practically magnetism. But I suppose it must be nice for your railway to be graced by modernity. I'd say you'd be lucky I'm here." "Well, we'd be lucky if you weren't," sneered Gordon. "We'd get along just fine without you." "Oh, well, that's up for debate," glared Spam Can. "Never mind that I could do double your work in a fraction of the time, but I brought precious sand to get you through this, well, cold spell. Not that I care for the stuff. We diesels never lose our grip on the rails. Whatever keeps your kettles boiling." "So, you brought the sand, have you?" Sir Topham Hatt stood close by. "Why, yes, sir," replied Spam Can with false sincerity. "Anything to keep your fine railway running." "And, where, pray tell, is it?" Come again, sir?" "The sand 199. As you're so certain of its whereabouts, perhaps you can explain why it wasn't with the rest of your train." Well, I'll tell you," interrupted Sir Topham Hatt. "It seems you kicked up such a fuss about having to come to my fine railway that you left before the last trucks have been coupled to your train. What do you suppose they contain?" Oh dear," blushed Spam Can. "I would suggest you make yourself comfortable," continued Sir Topham Hatt. "Due to bridge works, you won't be going home tonight. You can help with the freight work tomorrow. At least then you'll be somewhat useful. Good day to you." The ancients chuckled in delight, all except Edward. "I'm worried," he sighed. "Driver says there's a hard frost coming tonight, and my sandboxes are, well, rather low." pouted Spam Can. "Modern engines aren't concerned with such trivial matters. Sand, indeed. Is this a railway or a playground? Just stand aside and let me handle things, old-timer." The engines hissed, but Edward stayed silent. The next day, Edward collected his passengers. His driver was right. Frost coated the rails, and he'd witnessed other engines wheel-slipping all morning. "Right," Edward thought as the guard blew his whistle. "Nice and steady. We'll be all right." Edward puffed steadily along, dropping sand if he felt he had no grip. Thankfully, the morning sun had melted the frost. That's good, he smiled. But the sun was no use in the tunnel. It was dark and frigid, and frost clung to the rails. As Edward steamed through, his wheels slipped, and the coaches dragged him to a snail's pace. Come on, he groaned. He tried to drop more sand, but his sandboxes were depleted. "Go on, Edward," called the driver. "You're nearly there." Then there was more trouble. Edward was puffing so hard his smoke began to fill the tunnel. His driver and fireman covered their noses with their jackets. "Nearly there," huffed Edward. With one final effort, he burst into the daylight. His wheels found their grip once again. "Brilliant, old boy! Well done!" cheered his crew. From the opposite direction, Spam Can was trundling along with his freight. "Looking a little worse for wear, eh, old iron?" he chortled with delight. "Oh dear," thought Edward. "He won't like my smoke in the tunnel." He didn't. "Oh, what's going on?" he coughed, shutting his eyes. Oh, help! Fire! Oh, I'm too young and reliable to go up in flames. Oh." He was too startled to notice the frosty rails and heavy train had dragged him to a complete standstill. The guard ran back to the last station. Edward was resting when the guard arrived and asked for his help. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir," sighed Edward, "but I've got no sand left. A trade like that will be too much for me without it."
"That wretched diesel is nothing but bad luck," hissed Gordon. "Is this a railway or a playground?" "He's certainly treating it like the latter."
"That's it!" cried Edward. "Gordon, you're brilliant!" He turned to his driver. "There's a school near the station, and their playground has plenty of sand. I'm sure we can borrow some given the situation." The driver, fireman, and guard wasted no time. They trundled over to the school, filled buckets with sand, and when they returned, Edward's sandboxes were full once more. "Off we go!" he whistled determinedly. By now the smoke had cleared from the tunnel. Spamcan hadn't noticed, though. His eyes were shut tight, and he continued to shudder and whinge as his wheels spun.
Of all these years of service, only for it to end on this rotten railway. Oh, it's good for me. Oh, tell my fitter I
made it out of the tunnel in the end. Spamcan cracked open one eye. There was Edward buffering up in front. Spamcan eyed the smoke wafting from his funnel and realized what happened at once.
Well, oh my. Perhaps I got a bit, caught up in all the excitement.
Well, let's get you moving so the others can get caught up. You've delayed them with all this running on the spot. Slow and carefully, Edward pulled Spamcan and the train free of the tunnel. The sand did the trick, and he had no more trouble with the icy rails. When he reached the station, Edward chuckled. "Oh, not too shabby for an old iron, wouldn't you say?" Spamcan didn't say. He left later that day, much to the delight of the others. It was strange, then, when he returned the following morning with only a few trucks.
"Finally bought that sand you steamers were clamoring for," he muttered, trying not to make eye contact.
Edward noticed one of the trucks was still coupled as Spamcan moved off. "I say, keeping some for yourself?"
"Your fat controller says I'm to take it to the schoolyard as repayment. Such work is beneath me," he growled.
"Well, I'm sure the children will be pleased," Edward smiled. "And you can use some of it yourself if you ever slip again. I'm sure you wouldn't mind that beneath you, eh?" Spamcan's only reply was a disgruntled honk.